ॐ अखण्डमण्डलाकारं व्याप्तं येन चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। हरिः ओम्। ॐ नमो भगवते श्रीरामकृष्णाय। ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जनाः। Readings from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. M's second visit to Sri Ramakrishna took place on the southeast veranda at 8 o'clock in the morning. The master was about to be shaved, the barber having just arrived. As the cold season still lingered, he had put on a moleskin shawl bordered with red. Seeing M, the master said, "So you have come, that's good. Sit down here." He was smiling. He stammered a little when he spoke. Sri Ramakrishna to M. "Where do you live?" M. "In Calcutta, sir." Sri Ramakrishna. "Where are you staying here?" M. "I am at Baranagar at my older sister's, Ishan Kavira's house." Sri Ramakrishna. "Oh, at Ishan's? Well, how is Keshav now? He was very ill?" M. "Indeed, I have heard so too, but I believe he is well now." Sri Ramakrishna. "I made a vow to worship the mother with green coconut and sugar on Keshav's recovery. Sometimes in the early hours of the morning, I would wake up and cry before her, 'Mother, please make Keshav well again. If Keshav doesn't live, whom shall I talk with when I go to Calcutta?' And so it was that I resolved to offer her the green coconut and sugar. Tell me, do you know of a certain Mr. Cook who has come to Calcutta? Is it true that he is giving lectures? Once Keshav took me on a steamer, and this Mr. Cook too was in the party." M. "Yes, sir. I have heard something like that, but I have never been to his lectures. I don't know much about him." Sri Ramakrishna. "Pratap's brother came here. He stayed a few days. He had nothing to do and said he wanted to live here. I came to know that he had left his wife and children with his father-in-law. He has a whole brood of them. So I took him to task. Just fancy, he is the father of so many children. Will people from the neighborhood feed them and bring them up? He isn't even ashamed that someone else is feeding his wife and children, and that they have been left at his father-in-law's house. I scolded him very hard and asked him to look for a job. Then he was willing to live here." "Are you married?" M. "Yes, sir." Sri Ramakrishna with a shudder. "Oh, Ramlal, alas, he is married." Like one guilty of a terrible offense, M sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the ground. He thought, "Is it such a wicked thing to get married?" The master continued, "Have you any children?" M this time could hear the beating of his own heart. He whispered in a trembling voice, "Yes, sir, I have children." Very sadly, Sri Ramakrishna said, "Ah me, he even has children." Thus rebuked, M sat speechless. His pride had received a blow. After a few minutes, Sri Ramakrishna looked at him kindly and said affectionately, "You see, you have certain good signs. I know them by looking at a person's forehead, his eyes, and so on. Tell me now, what kind of person is your wife? Has she spiritual attributes, or is she under the power of avidya?" M. "She is all right, But I am afraid she is ignorant. Master, with evident displeasure. And you are a man of knowledge. M had yet to learn the distinction between knowledge and ignorance. Up to this time, his conception had been that one got knowledge from books and schools. Later on, he gave up this false conception. He was taught that to know God is knowledge and not to know Him ignorance. When Sri Ramakrishna exclaimed, "And you are a man of knowledge," M's ego was again badly shocked. Master, well, do you believe in God with form or without form? M, rather surprised, said to himself, how can one believe in God without form when one believes in God with form? And if one believes in God without form, how can one believe that God has a form? Can these two contradictory ideas be true at the same time? Can a white liquid like milk be black? M. Sir, I like to think of God as formless. Master, very good. It is enough to have faith in either aspect. You believe in God without form. That is quite all right. But never for a moment think that this alone is true and all else false. Remember that God with form is just as true as God without form. But hold fast to your own conviction. The assertion that both are equally true amazed him. He had never learned this from his books. Thus his ego received a third blow. But since it was not yet completely crushed, he came forward to argue with the master a little more. M. Sir, suppose one believes in God with form. Certainly, he is not the clay image. Master interrupting. But why clay? It is an image of spirit. M could not quite understand the significance of this image of spirit. But sir, he said to the master, one should explain to those who worship the clay image that it is not God, and that while worshipping it, they should have God in view and not the clay image. One should not worship clay. Master sharply, that's the one hobby of you Calcutta people, giving lectures and bringing others to the light. Nobody ever stops to consider how to get the light himself. Who are you to teach others? He who is the Lord of the universe will teach everyone. He alone teaches us, who has created this universe, who has made the sun and moon, men and bees, and all other beings, who has provided means for their sustenance, who has given children, parents, and endowed them with love to bring them up. The Lord has done so many things. Will He not show people the way to worship Him? If they need teaching, then He will be the teacher. He is our inner guide. Suppose there is an error in worshipping the clay image. Doesn't God know that through it He alone is being invoked? He will be pleased with that very worship. Why should you get a headache over it? You had better try for knowledge and devotion yourself. This time, Yam felt that his ego was completely crushed. He now said to himself, yes, he has spoken the truth. What need is there for me to teach others? Have I known God? Do I really love Him? I haven't room enough for myself in my bed, and I'm inviting my friend to share it with me. I know nothing about God, yet I am trying to teach others. What a shame! How foolish I am! This is not mathematics or history or literature that one can teach it to others. No, this is the deep mystery of God. What He says appeals to me. This was M's first argument with the master, and happily his last. Master, you were talking of worshipping the clay image. Even if the image is made of clay, there is need for that sort of worship. God Himself has provided different forms of worship. He who is the Lord of the universe has arranged all these forms to suit different men in different stages of knowledge. The mother cooks different dishes to suit the stomachs of her different children. Suppose she has 5 children. If there is a fish to cook, she prepares various dishes from it: pilau, pickled fish, fried fish, and so on, to suit their different tastes and powers of digestion. Do you understand me? M. Humbly. Yes, sir. How, sir, may we fix our minds on God? Master. Repeat God's name and sing His glories, and keep holy company, and now and then visit God's devotees and holy men. The mind cannot dwell on God if it is immersed day and night in worldliness, in worldly duties and responsibilities. It is most necessary to go into solitude now and then and think of God. To fix the mind on God is very difficult in the beginning unless one practices meditation in solitude. When a tree is young, it should be fenced all around, otherwise, it may be destroyed by cattle. To meditate, you should withdraw within yourself or retire to a secluded corner or to the forest. And you should always discriminate between the real and the unreal. God alone is real, the eternal substance. All else is unreal, that is, impermanent. By discriminating thus, one should shake off impermanent objects from the mind. M. Humbly. How ought we to live in the world, sir? Master. Do all your duties, but you keep your mind on God. Live with all, with wife and children, father and mother, and serve them. Treat them as if they were very dear to you, but know in your heart of hearts that they do not belong to you. A maid servant in the house of a rich man performs all the household duties, but her thoughts are fixed on her own home in her native village. She brings up her master's children as if they were her own. She even speaks of them as my Rama or my Hari. But in her own mind, she knows very well that they do not belong to her at all. The tortoise moves about in the water, but can you guess where her thoughts are? There on the bank, where her eggs are lying. Do all your duties in the world, but keep your mind on God. If you enter the world without first cultivating love for God, you'll be entangled more and more. You'll be overwhelmed with its danger, its grief, its sorrows. And the more you think of worldly things, the more you'll be attached to them. First, rub your hands with oil and then break open the jackfruit. Otherwise, they will be smeared with its sticky milk. First, secure the oil of divine love and then set your hands to the duties of the world. But one must go into solitude to attain this divine love. To get butter from milk, you must let it set into curd in a secluded spot. If it is too much disturbed, milk won't turn into curd. Next, you must put aside all other duties, sit in a quiet spot and churn the curd. Only then do you get butter. Further, by meditating on God in solitude, the mind acquires knowledge, dispassion, and devotion. But the very same mind goes downward if it dwells in the world. In the world, there is only one thought, woman and gold. Swami Nikhilanji has given a note for the reference woman and gold. The term woman and gold, which has been used throughout in a collective sense, occurs again and again in the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna to designate the chief impediments to spiritual progress. This favorite expression of the master, Kamini Kanchan, has often been misconstrued. By it, he meant only lust and greed, the baneful influence of which retards the aspirant's spiritual growth. He used the word kamini or woman as a concrete term for the sex instinct when addressing his man devotees. He advised women, on the other hand, to shun man. Kanchan or gold symbolizes greed, which is the other obstacle to spiritual life. Sri Ramakrishna never taught his disciples to hate any woman or womankind in general. This can be seen clearly by going through all his teachings under this head and judging them collectively. The Master looked on all women as many images of the Divine Mother of the universe. He paid the highest homage to womankind by accepting a woman as his guide while practicing the very profound spiritual disciplines of Tantra. His wife, known and revered as the Holy Mother, was his constant companion and first disciple. At the end of his spiritual practice, he literally worshipped his wife as the embodiment of the goddess Kali, the Divine Mother. After his passing away, the Holy Mother became the spiritual guide not only of a large number of householders but also of many monastic members of the Ramakrishna order. The world is water and the mind milk. If you pour milk into water, they become one. You cannot find the pure milk anymore, but turn the milk into curd and churn it into butter. Then, when that butter is placed in water, it will float. So, practice spiritual discipline in solitude and obtain the butter of knowledge and love. Even if you keep that butter in the water of the world, the two will not mix. The butter will float. Together with this, you must practice discrimination. Woman and gold is impermanent. God is the only eternal substance. What does a man get with money? Food, clothes, and a dwelling place. Nothing more. You cannot realize God with its help. Therefore, money can never be the goal of life. That is the process of discrimination. Do you understand? Yes, sir. I recently read a Sanskrit play called Prabodha Chandrodaya. It deals with discrimination. Master. Yes. Discrimination about objects. Consider, what is there in money or in a beautiful body? Discriminate, and you will find that even the body of a beautiful woman consists of bones, flesh, fat, and other disagreeable things. Why should a man give up God and direct his attention to such things? Why should a man forget God for their sake? So by Master's grace, we are now on the second week on the readings of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Last week, we saw how Yam came to Sri Ramakrishna along with his friend Sidhu. Actually, as the story goes, Yam had thought of committing suicide, and the previous night he went and stayed with Sidhu, his friend. And then Sidhu told him in the morning, come, I am going to Dakshineswar, that is Rashmani's garden house. Let us go and see. One Paramahamsa is staying there. Let us go and look at him. So Yam agreed, but he was afraid to tell him about his decision to commit suicide. But then he came with Sidhu and met Sri Ramakrishna. That was the first meeting of Sri Ramakrishna and Yam had with. And Yam says that his first meeting was such, he could take out his mind from Sri Ramakrishna after meeting him and coming back. All through the week that he stayed, his mind was dwelling upon Dakshineswar and on Sri Ramakrishna. The way Sri Ramakrishna impressed upon his mind the very first meeting was something wonderful. Because Yam says, when I entered the room and found Ramakrishna seated on the small cot and devotees are seated on the floor and he was talking to them, he wondered whether is it Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or is he the wonderful Rishi? Like that he is wondering. That means how much impression Sri Ramakrishna created on the mind of him. And from that time onwards, he was so attached to Sri Ramakrishna, he forgot all about his committing suicide.